Welcome to Money Matters. I'm Emily Johnson, Certified Financial Planner and Managing Director of Polaris Capital Advisors. We're joined today by John Starr, who is an ERISA attorney and president of My Benefits, a plan administrator headquartered in Atlanta, and a plan administrator for a few hundred plans, actually, 401k plans, defined benefit plans, pension plans, etc., throughout the Southeast, I guess, but probably all over the place. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Well,
I appreciate coming all the way from Atlanta for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So wanted to talk with you because there, a lot of people have in their investment portfolio a 401k. Through their employer, perhaps through a previous employer. Others perhaps have pensions from an existing or previous employer. So there's a lot of interest in this subject. I know that there have been a lot of changes that have come down the pike here in the last year or so, and I was wondering if you could talk to me a little bit first about, as a participant, what participants might be interested in some of these changes that are impacting them that they should be cognizant of.
Well, I think there's three primary ones that a participant should really be thinking about. One is, and the whole reason for being in a plan, is your savings rates. So the savings rates every year get indexed for inflation, and they've gone up. So we'll talk a little bit about savings rates. I think those are important. The other thing that happened that everybody got in the mail was something in the magnitude of 20 or 30 pages from their plan provider.
And I'm sure everybody read it.
Yeah, nobody did.
Details.
Emily, nobody read it. It was
good for the pulp and paper industry.
It was good for adding confusion instead of clarity. So that was called a participant fee disclosure. So I think we should talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
And then the last piece is a kind of a new attribute we're seeing more and more in plans, which is some way of guaranteeing an income stream in retirement. So those would be the three primary topics. You want to kind of take them
Absolutely.
in order?
I think yes, hit them all.
All right.
Sounds
So the savings rate is certainly the big topic. So the big thing about being in a 401k plan is maximizing that plan. So my version, Emily, is get all your employer's money as much as you can get it as rapidly as you can get it.
Absolutely, it's free money.
It is
it's
free
offered
money
for you.
Well, it's free money, and it's free money that the IRS lets you take a tax deduction for or exclusion in your current year. So this year, if you're under age 50, unfortunately I'm not. If you're under age 50, that's $17,500.
So it's an increase of $500 from last year.
It is, but it's a big number, and most people forget about it. So most plans, the way we would write them, and most other plans are now written, you can typically load that $17,500. So if you got it hot in your pocket, you could say, hey, employer, don't take it just out regularly out of my paycheck to get to $17,500. If you get a bonus or you have some additional dollars you can stuff away, you can front load that or back load it. So you can say, take 100% of my pay until I get to that number. So it's a real planning opportunity. If you want to get out to that $17,500, you got to go.
Well, and when you're looking at increased marginal tax rates, for a lot of individuals that that have the ability to save that kind of money up front to front load it, that's obviously going to be a huge boon. I mean, saving those extra funds at that higher tax rate has an even greater impact.
Well, Emily, we hear about tax rates, and we hear about it from a federal tax rate, right? So some folks are hit with that, but it's also state tax rates as well. So I mean, when you really look at it, here in South Carolina, I mean, you're looking at nearly a 42% tax rate at the highest marginal tax rates. Well, that's
even higher than that.
Yeah, it's a big number. In Georgia, big numbers, and so those are real economic benefits to those employees. But if you get older, like me, right? If you get older, then it goes out to $23,000. They call that a catch-up contribution. So you get to do an additional $5,500 into your plan. So that's $23,000 in total. That's
a lot of money.
That's a giant number.
Yeah.
So when we draft plans, frankly, in many small businesses, that's about the number. So that $23,000 is just the personal savings rate, and you hit it earlier. Look, it's getting all the employer's money, and it sits there on the table. And so we watch often. Many retirement plans have a matching provision. So those matching provisions are usually somewhere between 3 and 4% of your pay. So if if you get out to $23,000, it's pretty easy to get to an actual savings rate in excess of 10%. And you pretty much need to start doing that when you get older to get to about that savings rate. So it's a cool way to do it. Another attribute to that some people are still looking at is Roth. So you've done Roth before.
We have, and we've talked a little bit about it, just the only difference being that the funds that go into a Roth are after-tax funds. Right. Funds that go into a traditional 401k are, of course, pre-tax funds, so they still grow tax-free, but when the funds come out of a Roth, they come out tax-free as well, by and large, with a few discrepancies, versus with a traditional 401k, when those funds come out of a traditional 401k, they're taxed as ordinary income. So those are the two major differences, but you're seeing a lot more Roth 401ks?
Yeah, I'm seeing Roth in two different ways. One is internal conversions of plan, taking the other money that hasn't been Roth before and converting some of that to Roth, so that's viable in many retirement plans for a participant. The other part is just taking advantage of that, because you can have a little Roth and you can have a lot of Roth.
You know, tell me who you recommend a Roth 401k to, because I actually, there are a lot of plans that we deal with that do have both options, the traditional and the Roth. Who do you recommend contribute to the Roth component, or do you recommend splitting that?
Yeah, it's a tax play, right? So if you're young and you can afford it, or your mom and dad will support you, which is a good thing too, right? If you're young and you can support it, then you ought to do it, because you know
to do the Roth.
Yeah, Roth, absolutely.
Because your tax rate's going to be low.
Super low, and it's going to be so low until you make more money. So why would you not pay at a lower tax rate for dollars that will be in your future at a higher tax rate? That's a good economy of scale. Then when you get to closer to my age, so you got like decades to go,
easily,
right? Yeah, decades, right? When you get closer to my age, you know, then the topic really is, you know, at what point do you not do Roth? So I think you start doing Roth when you make more money around 35 or 40. You probably stop doing Roth late into your 50s. So 35 is a good start point again, and you probably want to stop around 55 unless you have a whole lot of money. And if you have a whole lot of money, you know what a whole lot of money people say? They say, I plan on having this and then giving it to my children or grandchildren.
Because Roths are much better estate planning tools than traditional
Gigantic estate planning tools, because it's the only thing in the tax law that allows 2 generations of compounded tax-free growth, and that's a pretty cool thing. So, for example, my little 21-year-old daughter, who won't be watching this, but my little 21-year-old daughter, you know, she should be doing Roth. But if I accumulate a large amount of money and I pass it to, if I ever get married again, pass it to my spouse, recommendation, then, you know, she could pass it on to my children, or I could just designate my children or my child's grandchildren to my grandchildren to get it. So she, in other words, I get 65, I pass it on to my kid. My kid can have that money over the rest of their life expectancy. So normal life expectancy is 87, so it's 2 generations of compounded tax-free growth for somewhere between 70 and 90 years.
You know,
that's huge.
When you start taking the just 401k plans, et cetera, and you take it out into the estate planning realm and the tax diversification realm, I think it becomes really overwhelming for a lot of people. So the basic nuts and bolts of this are, of course, maximize whatever savings you can. It's $17,500 for those under 50, $23,000 for those over 50, and then they should look into Roths in certain scenarios to sort of simplify this, because obviously once we start getting into these various realms, it can become a little bit confusing and overwhelming. So
just like I described it, very confusing and overwhelming.
Well, you're an ERISA attorney; that's your prerogative.
So
so the second, we talked about savings rates. The second point that you wanted to touch on
was fee disclosure. So everybody got this piece in the mail that was about their retirement plan, and try to disclose to them their fees. And what it was really doing was just trying to say, the funds that I have available in my plan, how do they rank up against their peer group? Are there other direct fees that I'm paying out of my account that I didn't know? And a direct fee, for example, would be for plan administration, or from the provider charging a per-person fee. Oftentimes those are pushed back to the participant, and they're not aware of where they're coming from. That fee disclosure went to it. It's very, very voluminous. The most important thing, Emily, is that someone needs to talk to a financial advisor, because how does that fund match up to anything else? So I think that's an important piece. The other piece is guaranteed income for life. So a large number of plans are offering an annuity feature in a retirement plan.
Interesting.
So the annuity feature says, hey, you know, when I'm getting to 55 and I'm trying to figure it out, I can get a guaranteed amount all the way through my life or through my spouse's life expectancy.
That is interesting, because as you see pensions falling off, fewer and fewer pensions, they're artificially creating pensions through 401ks as a result. That's really interesting.
And inexpensively. So that these guaranteed annuities are typically lower than an individual purchased annuity. So it's very worth a consideration.
Interesting. Well, please, if you don't mind, we're going to have to take a quick break,
Oh, yeah,
quick
absolutely.
commercial break here, but we'll be right back because I'd like to address a few of these issues and how they affect plan sponsors as well. So,
Absolutely.
thanks very much. We'll be right back. This is Money Matters. Welcome back to Money Matters. We're joined today by John Starr of My Benefits, and we're discussing the difference there, the changes that have gone on with plans, 401k plans, pensions, etc. Now in 2013, and we were just talking about how those changes impact plan participants, those of us that are participants in 401ks and pensions. Let's now talk about plan sponsors, because I know a lot more has actually come down the pike that's going to be impacting plan sponsors.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little about that.
Sure. Well, there's a couple big things that have gone on. First of all, every plan sponsor has gotten their own fee disclosure notice trying to tell them where their plan is relative to other related plans, specifically about how much they're paying out of pocket, how much the providers are charging them, what other people are getting out of their own plan. So in other words, how much does, Bobby, the advisor, how much is he taking out of the plan too? So it discloses that, and then it shows their funds, their investment choices against a comparative index.
Who selected the the index that's used, et cetera? I mean, who sort of governed this?
Yeah, so the rules wanted peer industry indexes, so the rules basically gave us those provisions.
Okay.
So they didn't specifically say you had to use some sort of MS. This is your thing, right? So you don't have to always use S&P 500. There's various different things like Russell and so on, and so you could use a measuring index. So some people like at some firms like Lipper, right? So you could use Lipper. You could use other
Got
indices.
it. And just for clarification, the plan sponsor is typically the employer, correct?
Yeah.
So it could be a large employer, it could be a small employer, it's a mom and pop operation. So plan sponsors are everywhere. They're not just the John Hancocks of the world. They're the
No, they're actually the companies.
Right.
And so what the real hook to that fee disclosure is guess what? That created an affirmative ERISA obligation on the plan sponsor to evaluate their plan against the industry. So, before when you sponsor your own plan, and I sponsor my own plan, when I sponsored it, I didn't have the affirmative obligation to go out and competitively price my plan.
Right.
Well, under this rule, that's exactly what ERISA put on me.
And what are the consequences of not doing that, of not going out and evaluating your plan?
Failure to exercise, your fiduciary duties can, in fact, invite a lawsuit. It can invite a DOL inquiry or audit. So it creates both a governmental regulatory potential threat as well as a participant threat.
Okay.
So big stuff, right? So, what does that really say to me, to a plan sponsor? It says, stop doing it. Why you want to be responsible for something you can't measure? So the other trend that we're seeing quite a bit of is moving the fiduciary responsibility of a plan sponsor for administering the plan, making those evaluations, and shifting it to somebody else. How about not having the liability? Emily, that's usually a better choice, isn't it?
Absolutely.
well, that's what they can do. So, if I may be slightly technical for a second, and I'm going to use my favorite things, my hands, right? So there's two fiduciaries to every plan. One is the plan administrator, and the other one is the plan investment fiduciary. The investment fiduciary, that's the one we hear about most of the time. Boy, I've chosen these funds. Are they the right funds? It takes a lot of effort to make that right hand not work. So many of the providers and financial advisors and all the rest of the industry really keeps you from typically making that mistake. So the DOL in 2011, they issued $1.3 billion of fines. 98% of it had nothing to do with the right hand. It had everything to do with the administration. So, for example, that fee disclosure piece, they were going after that. Loans, hardships, how you operated your plan. Did you follow the terms of your plans with the providers you chose? That's called the plan administrator. So that left hand is where all the liability actually exists and where plan sponsors suffer. Guess who's the plan administrator for most every plan?
The plan sponsor.
Right.
Right.
So they took on the liability themselves. And what do? They hire a vendor, a John Hancock, a Transamerica. They hire the vendor hoping they're going to do the job. They might hire us to help support that. Well, those two pieces, how much liability I have? Almost none. That's not such a good deal. You know how much John Hancock has? Almost none. Guess who has the liability?
Still the plan sponsor.
Right. So the idea is shift away that liability and hire somebody to actually take the name. So what happens is when we write a document, we'll put this third party, in fact, we have a company, big surprise, right? We have a company that does exactly that. It's called an ERISA 316 plan administrator. And instead of the company being the named fiduciary plan administrator, we become the named plan administrator.
Okay.
So the company literally
removes that liability
Yeah.
and says you're going to maintain all of these rules and make sure that we're compliant.
and be liable for it, and talk to the Department of Labor if they call. So those are really that's a significant sea change of moving liability away from the plan sponsor and onto somebody else. And the truth is that plan sponsors don't want the responsibility
Right.
anyhow.
Right.
They want to
run their company and produce.
And do good things for their employees.
Right.
And maybe for themselves as well. But, to do good things, and to do that, they have to offer this retirement plan, which is a cool thing to have. But why not shift the duties away and not take that responsibility? That's cooler. And so that's the other big trend. Fee disclosure, and then looking at moving the liability to a third party.
Now, your company also offers consulting services as well.
Yep.
So, typically, I know I've worked with you quite a bit, so typically you come in, your company comes in, and they will look at a current plan design or perhaps a company that doesn't yet have a plan and make recommendations. Can you walk me through that basic process?
So it's about math. So the first thing is, what potential designs can I have? The rules are so broadly written that you can get weird guys like me to do it for you, right? And part of that is really examining and analyzing, what math could we use to maximize the plan?
So you're looking at the client demographics being the sponsor, what the sponsor's objectives are, the employer's objectives, how much money are they looking to save, what are they looking to promote, are they looking to motivate tenure, are they looking to motivate their employees' savings, et cetera? And these are all questions that you ask in those initial interviews?
That's right. So the biggest thing we want to know is, dates of hire, dates of birth, and annualized compensation for employees. And from that, we will do the math. The other part is, let's look at your document. Most of these documents are written so poorly, Emily, that they're really never going to be able to take advantage of it.
Right.
So fixing the document so that it achieves their objectives, running the math to tell them what numerically that means to them.
And do you also introduce different types of or I guess not sponsors isn't the word, but different investment options for plans? I know that you work with all of them, Transamerica, Hartford, et cetera. So when you're looking at what they currently have, I know you might not make fund recommendations, but in terms of the different plans or companies that are out there to do that, do you make those recommendations? Or
sure. I mean,
if asked to?
Well, it's going back to that fee disclosure piece. Part of their job is to determine whether or not they have reasonable fees. So part of that reasonable fees is this provider, John Hancock or Hartford or whoever, is this provider the appropriate provider from a cost perspective for my company, and what does the rest of the industry look like? So we'll go and help work with their financial advisor to analyze that information, and then come back and say numerically, here's what it is. Here's a qualitative and a quantitative, answer.
Just out of curiosity, it's probably not fair to ask you this question, but you hear whispers of contributions to 401ks might become not tax deductible for certain income levels. It might be that when individuals take funds out of a 401k or a pension that the tax will change based on what their income levels are. What kind of whispering do you hear, given that is, that's your bailiwick? What kind of whispering do you hear, and do you think there's any merit to those questions? I'm sorry, Francis, it's not fair.
No, look, I mean, here, the first thing is there's almost zero probability of a significant change. If you think about who's in a retirement plan, it's us. It's all, every one of us. And to make a significant change to that means that somebody else is going to have to make up that difference.
At the same time that we're looking to possibly change Social Security.
Yep,
So.
and budget deficit. So that there's not the likelihood of that is extraordinarily low. But what is in the likelihood that high earners are going to be somehow reduced, that's extraordinarily low as well. Because guess who makes a decision whether or not an employer has a plan? Those high earners. And so those things I think just have almost no light of day to them.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you can come back and join us again, because I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of trends that will come out of this that will be really interesting. So I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, my total pleasure. Thanks.
Wonderful. Well, thank you guys for joining us this week as well. Please check us out on Facebook. Send us any questions that you might have. Email us. We love hearing from you. We love your ideas. So please keep them coming. We look forward to seeing you here next week. I'm Emily Johnson, and this is Money Matters. Have a great week.